Okay, we're going to start in English. So I guess nobody else is coming. We're going to talk about something that I mentioned last week that we will be talking about this week. And that is, we're going to focus on the idea of emotional intelligence. And we split this into two. And there might even be more in January. When we come back in January, there might even be more to do in this area. Because I think we're not psychologists. We're not going to be counseling kids. We're not going to be, kind of particularly worried about trauma and things where they need help. Although those are things that when they come up, if we're worried, you guys talk to me. I don't know how to deal with it. So then I talk to Patricia. We've got a structure of how we would deal with that. So if you're worried about a student, you come out. So it's not something that you deal with, but I think having an idea about emotional intelligence is fundamental for what we're going to do, but it's also fundamental for who we are. Okay, so this is not just to build, help you with your students. It's also to help you with you. All right. And if I'd learned all this stuff a lot earlier, my life would be very different from what it is now, because I would probably still be married. And that's the truth of it. So emotional intelligence. When we talk about emotional intelligence, what is emotional intelligence? Give me your ideas. Tell me what you think.
Good question.
Well,
I don't know. Maybe.
shoot. Go for it, Maria.
Okay, maybe to know how to recognize what you are feeling and learning how to deal with that, learning what causes that feelings, and how can you live with that in order that not affect you in a bad way.
Okay.
I don't know.
And I would complement that with the other side. So Marilia talks about recognizing emotions in oneself. I would say, and then the next step would be to recognize in others,
Okay.
looking at those cues, different faces, different emotions, connecting those with different emotions, and recognizing that the other person is feeling something that we have recognized in ourselves, and we can empathize with whatever that person is going through. So being able to see in others what we also feel.
I'm going to show you a little model of emotional intelligence. There are several models of emotional intelligence and different tools, but the research, I think the research that things are based on when we started talking about emotional intelligence over the last, I think, 30 something years, at least 30 years.
Since Daniel Goleman,
predates Daniel Goleman.
It does? Okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna look at Goleman's structure of emotional intelligence. But where did he get it from? Now I know this because at one point on his website he actually referred back to where he got it from. Because he was a journalist and he was writing about stuff, and he'd read some research by two psychologists called Peter Salovey and John Mayer. Now, Peter Salovey was from Yale, and Peter Salovey is currently the dean of Yale, so he's like the top guy in Yale. And so they have a really strong department on the area of emotional intelligence. So I next time we get together, we will be digging into a couple of tools that have more recently in the past few years come out of University of Yale. So what happened was Salovey and Mayer, I think it was 89 or 90, they wrote a paper which Daniel Goleman read. And then Daniel Goleman wrote about it, and he then popularized it, particularly in the workplace, because it was somewhat meant more for education. But then he applied it to the work. So I think his first book was Emotional Intelligence at Work, which is kind of like play with words as well. Because it means the same as inteligência emocional a trabalhar and inteligência emocional no trabalho. The phrase can mean two things. So Goleman popularized it, and he has a. But if you look on Wikipedia actually, and you look up into emotional intelligence on Wikipedia, you'll see a few different models of emotional intelligence, and there are a lot of other psychologists that have come out of Yale, like Daniel Caruso, who is also incredible in the area of emotional intelligence, and so putting all those together, I mean. For about 2 years, there's this international, it's called WBEX, World Business and Executive Coaching Summit. And it's worldwide. And for 2 years, I was the curator, they called it, for emotional intelligence. So I was, together with somebody else, we ran the forum, the part which was emotional intelligence. There was another one on neuroscience, another one on conflict management, another, there were a number of different ones. And together with this American lady, I was the person that was doing the stuff on emotional intelligence. So kind of writing about it, contributing to it, kind of trying to get the dynamic and the discussion going with other people about emotional intelligence and so on. So I've been interested in it for a while, but the first time I came across emotional intelligence was, I think, in 1984. No, 1994. In Time magazine. The school that I was working with used to receive Time magazine, and I remember reading about emotional intelligence in Time magazine, and how I wish I'd really understood it, and how I wish I'd kept on working to understand it in a deeper way. And even over the last, like, at least 10 years, I've done a lot of work in the area of emotional intelligence myself. But still, I think, it's even over the last 2 years that I've really grown even more in my understanding of it. So in some ways, there's a buzzword, what emotional intelligence is. People talk about it. They can talk about the models of it. They can mention Goleman. They can talk about Goleman's structure of it. But when push comes to shove, they fly off the handle, they get pissed off, they, insult people. They are not emotionally intelligent. Just because you know about some of the theories, some of the ideas, doesn't actually make you emotionally intelligent. So we're going to look at the model. So Goleman's model is self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. So in the top two, it's self. It's about self. So it's about self-awareness, emotional self-awareness. And that's what you said, Marilia, is knowing what you're feeling, being able to know your emotions. But then we can dig a lot deeper into what that actually means. It's not just knowing your emotions, but it's actually developing a more sophisticated vocabulary for your emotions, understanding mixed emotions, understanding where they come from, understanding the information that we're getting from our emotions, which we'll discuss in the next one when we look at the mood meter. But so emotional self-awareness is, I'm in the middle of kind of what Daniel Goleman calls an emotional hijack, which is amygdala hijack, which is something just happened and I'm destabilized. That's because the amygdala in the middle of my brain, amygdala is like these two walnut things that you have in the base back of your brain inside. They say if you get shot, in the ear and in the eye, or in the forehead where it crosses is where you'll find the amygdala. And the amygdala is like a receiver. What we know about it is that it's a receiver of information, and it perceives threat. So it's looking for threat. So it's looking for, something happens and it identifies from previous experience, or because it's because there is no previous experience, so it's completely unknown. And it on automatic, a lot of it is on automatic, and it causes people to react in typical ways. So that might be fight, flight, or freezing. So, in a situation of conflict or something is threatening, you might just freeze, or you might run. So when you see somebody, you run from the police and they say, "Why did you run? Why did you run?" It's it's an automatic reaction to perceived threat that they would run. Others fight. There's nothing that they can do about it. It's just their reaction. And you think, what an absolute idiot. There's some great police programs on the UK, and you think, what on earth possessed this person to react this way with the police? And it's an amygdala reaction. It's perceived threat and an automatic reaction, which is why in martial arts, when you train in martial arts, you've trained the reaction so that when that thing happens and you don't have to think, you automatically respond in a way which has been practiced and measured. So self-awareness then is, okay, the emotion came and I'm aware that I'm not thinking straight, that my thoughts are clouded, that I'm in an emotional state, that what are the names of the emotions? How can I name them? So it's learning more about what the names are, knowing where they come from, knowing what the consequences may be. So it's being very, very self-aware and being aware of the effect that I have on other people. And so trying to be balanced so that I don't have a negative effect on other people. Then that leads on to the ability to self-manage. I think the easiest example of the understanding what self-management means is when you know that you're really, really, really angry with somebody, but you choose not to hit them. You're able to control yourself. So this is self-control there. The ability to manage your emotions, the ability to express them in an appropriate way. The ability to not so this is the difference what happens then when these police people when they're running away from the police. They're not capable of managing themselves. There's no self-management. Okay. And you can get into a lot of the neuroscience around this. We don't have time to go into it. I could really go off onto a tangent and talk about neuroscience and about the fact that, the adolescent brain, particularly because we're talking about kids in school, the adolescent brain, it's not formed. On average, your brain completes its development, the average of 24 years of age, which means that there's some people who are over 24 years of age and their brain is not fully developed. Sometimes you see quite a difference between somebody who's 16 and the same person when they're 24 and thinking in a completely different way, because they're less impulsive, because impulsivity is something which is very specifically part of the adolescent brain, because there's a lack of communication between what is the sophisticated area here of higher function logic, impulse control, and so on at the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which then doesn't connect up with the parts of the brain that the adolescent is working with very often, which is in reaction, and not so much between logical thought. And then you see over the years, they develop the ability to actually think about whether what they're doing is stupid. I saw a video once, and it says, why do boys die? Or why do men die more than women in stupid accidents? And those like big round balls that you can get inside. There's like a part that you get inside them, close them, and then you can and what they did is there was somebody inside one of those balls, and then they hit it with the car, and it bounced up into a tree. It's like only guys do this stuff. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. But it's very typical for the development of an adolescent brain before they get to adulthood. And there are reasons why. And there's a guy called Daniel Siegel. Daniel Siegel is an American doctor, psychologist, psychiatrist, child psychologist, and teacher at, I think, University of California. And he has a book called Brainstorm, The Power of the Adolescent Mind. And so he explains why certain things go on in an adolescent brain, and why they're impulsive and why they need to be impulsive and how that develops. I think Jordan Peterson has talked a lot as well about boys in education, the ways that boys are educated and girls are educated needs to be different, because boys really need to run around and exhaust themselves when they're very young. And we try to keep them still in school and kind of pin them down. I think one of the worst situations, when I was talking with somebody about the mentoring that we do from one of the other groups, was that there was one of the kids, and his mentoring time was when the other kids were on break outside playing. And I was like, but the psychologist had said, the school had said he had to do the mentoring, and it was going to be at that time, and it was going to be when everybody's outside playing. I would say, man, that's creating a problem. Let him go outside and play, kind of figure out another time that he can do that he can do the mentoring, to make sure that he is outside playing, exhausting himself, and doing what rough boy should do. So that's self-awareness and self-management. So as you become more self-aware, as you understand emotions more deeply, then you're able to self-regulate better, be able to self-manage better. And then moving on from that, third step is then becoming more aware of other people and their emotions and what's going on. And this is something I think where teachers struggle, because there's maybe one teacher in a class of 20, 30 kids, and there's a lot going on, and they forget that all those kids have emotions, and the emotions are legitimate, and the teacher takes it personally. And so we go back to Rui Trindade, Padrinho de Instrução, authority, and no place for conflict. And the teacher always understands that as disrespect for the teacher, rather than a natural thing that's going on, because those kids in that class are going to have their own emotions. So one of the tools that we're looking at the next time, you'll understand then what are the applications that tool can have in the classroom, which is great. And then the last level then is, again, with others, going into the area of action, which is relationship management, being able to relate with others, applying your knowledge of your own emotions, your ability to self-control, self-manage, understanding how other people's emotions work. Therefore, then you're more capable to work in a group to manage the relationships of the group, and in the group, and your own within that group. So Goleman, over, I think a couple of years ago, they developed this idea here that under self-awareness, you've got emotional self-awareness, which is understanding. Now, be aware, this is information, okay? And you can know this backwards, forwards, upways, downways, inside out, whatever way, and still have no emotional intelligence. When we look at the tools that we look at the next time, you can understand then where you go to the application of it, where you can actually grow the emotional intelligence, okay? Might start off from some knowledge, but this is theory, this is knowledge. It doesn't mean that just because you know everything about this, that you're going to be emotionally intelligent. So in terms of self-management, they're looking at emotional balance. When people feel frustrated, very often, I mean, I'm a coach, so one of the things that sometimes I see and I'm a coach trainer, and I see new coaches doing, when they're coaching somebody and the person says, I'm frustrated, they say, how can you move past this frustration? How can you get over this frustration? How are you going to deal with it to get it out the way? And I talk to them about, it's not the point of the coaching conversation that the person actually gets rid of the emotion of frustration, but rather understands the emotion of frustration. What is causing this emotion of frustration? What information am I getting about this? And then how useful is frustration to me? And what is the appropriate way to react? So a couple of years ago, I had a group of students, and we went around and we asked, how are you this week and what's going on? And one of them was emotionally, he's like, I'm just frustrated this week. And we talked about it. And it was interesting because he was really, really vulnerable, and it was an English lesson, and it was a work group. And he said, I'm really frustrated this week. And I said, what are you frustrated about? Do you want to share? And he did. He shared, and he really was very, very vulnerable. And I said to him, how useful is this frustration to you getting a solution? And he said, actually, it's really useful because it's motivating me, because I'm working extra to get things done. And so the emotion of frustration itself was information, but also it was a motivator. Anger is very often a motivator, a great motivator, because it's connected to justice. Anger is very often connected to a feeling of injustice in some way. So it's understanding what's behind those. And we don't have to be deeply understanding in a psychological way, you know, of kind of therapy and whatever, what's behind the emotions. But understand that emotions have a purpose. And even what we would call negative emotions doesn't mean that they're bad emotions. It just means that they don't feel very nice, but they give us very good, very, very good information. And so emotional intelligence and the self-awareness and the management is understanding the emotions better in order to make better decisions, to be able to adapt better, to achieve better, to, you know, you're frustrated because if we see it when people don't pass their driving test, they get frustrated, they get a bit angry, they get disappointed, embarrassed. It's not just one emotion, it's a whole bunch of emotions. I don't know how many times you guys ever had to repeat your driving test, if at all.
I did it.
Yeah, Marilia.
Yeah. First time I go straight into a red light.
I passed my first time when I was 17.
No, and I was 20, I don't know, 20.
But my sister took about like 6 or 7 times. But the thing is, you know, the embarrassment, the emotion that comes from that is it doesn't make you give up.
Yeah.
Actually can make you more, okay, it can give you some information. I don't want to feel this way again. Therefore, I'm going to work harder. Therefore, I'm going to study more and I'm going to be, you know, on top of this. So it can give you good motivation to achieve better. If you feel frustrated that you've got a timetable, you know, like something coming up soon, and you're getting frustrated and you're getting stressed and whatever, some of that stress actually is motivating you towards doing something. So I have a friend, Sergio, and if I say, Sergio, let's, you know, so you want to go to the cinema, and he said, I can't. I've got this thing that I need to finish in 3 weeks. Whereas with me, if he says, hey, you know, do you want to go to the cinema? And I'll say, well, I have a project that I have to hand in tomorrow morning, but yeah, let's go to the cinema, and then I'll stay up and I'll finish all through the night. But I came to the conclusion that we both feel the same stress. We just feel it at different times. And the success of the project is very often similar. And a positive outlook. And it doesn't mean thinking positively. It's not positive thinking. It's like, I moved back to the UK. Emotionally, it's not an easy move. I knew it wouldn't be an easy move. And people ask me all the time, how is it going? And I was talking to a friend just yesterday. I said, you know, I probably will never adapt back. That's okay. I accept that I'm spoiled. I'm no longer from here. So, you know, why would I adapt back? I'll make things work. I'll know how things work. I'll make my life here. I'll have a purpose and so on. But I know emotionally I'll have these other feelings as well. You know, what do you do? Well, cheap flight, go back and have a holiday. You know what I mean? It's having a positive outlook, even though you know that, okay, there's some tough emotions that are going to be involved in this change, in this future. I put myself through a course, which I have to do some work on, and I know that I'm going to feel stressed doing some of that work. And I kid myself, maybe I won't feel stressed. Maybe I'll start early and I'll finish it early. And I, you know, probably won't, but I'll pass it and I will do well, even though I know that there will be stressful times. So understanding emotions and how they work actually helps you to have more of a positive outlook in moving forward to getting things done. So kids in school, oh, I've got this exam, I've got this thing, and it's really hard, and I don't know how to do it. And then we're taking them then through the growth mindset, understanding their emotions, and then helping them to develop their growth mindset. And realize, you know, you're probably smarter than you think you are. And a lot, you know, if you work hard, a lot of this stuff is not about being smart. It's about working hard. If you put some work in, you'll be able to do it. Nobody learned to drive and then use your driving lessons as an example. I didn't pass my test first time or the second time, or but it made me more determined to do well. I had a friend who got his driving license when he was 18. And I said, he was using my computer to do tests. I said, oh, I can see you studying. He said, I'm not studying. I don't know how to study. I'm dumb. And I said, what you're doing is called studying. You have an objective. You need to pass this exam. In order to pass the exam, you need to learn these things. You're spending time in doing that. That is studying, my friend. So you do know how to study when you're interested. He hadn't kind of connected those dots. And then it's in that conversation sometimes that can come. So this is part of what emotional intelligence is there. Social awareness, I think, Andrea, you mentioned there the idea of empathy. Empathy doesn't necessarily mean that we feel what the other person is feeling exactly, but we can have a vague idea, or we can kind of figure out, or we understand that we feel deeply about something as well. So we don't say things like, I know what you're feeling. It's more like,
That's in my book, that's a big no-no.
yeah, it's more like, okay, I'm here. I'll listen to you.
Yeah.
You know, and then when it's appropriate, say, you know, when I'm in a bad place, all I want is for somebody to just, you know, sometimes listen to me, not fix it, not give me advice. And that is empathy as well, as when you realize that if I was in this place and somebody started giving me advice, I would be really annoyed. So maybe it's not advice that they need. So I might ask them, what do you need right now? And it's that availability, and it's that serving the person that comes from a place of recognizing that there is deep emotion. I think something that Brene Brown said, I think the last couple of years, she said one of the biggest mistakes that she'd made in her research over the last 20 years is believing that you can understand other people's emotions. She said you can't. You can understand your own, but empathy means that you can be in a place where you're willing to make an attempt, or there's something close, or you think, okay, you know, there's something deep going on here, and I'm going to be with this person in this space. I've had coaching sessions where I've had people deeply moved and they cry. I had one where I cried. It was a tear come to my eye, and they could see that I was emotional. And I said, what do you need right now? Do you need to stop? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need to pause? What do you need? Give them a tissue. I said, what do you need? That's empathy. As soon as you say things like, oh, I know exactly how you're feeling, that is the opposite of empathy. That is so shit. Oops, that's recorded. And then there's organizational awareness as well. It's being in an organization, understanding how things move, how things work, what's going on in the room, reading the air, kind of get an idea, being able to navigate conflicts, being a peacemaker. There's a lot about organizational awareness as well that comes into that, picking up what's going on. I think this is essential for teachers, because they do have to understand the emotions that are happening for them as professionals, but also the emotions that are going in the classroom, and that all of the emotions are valid. They are legitimate, they are real, and there is a way to navigate them. And then the relationship management then, which is the deeper area, then is going into how you can influence people, coaching and mentoring people, managing conflict, teamwork, and inspirational leadership. Now, if you look at some of these things, actually, it's quite easy then to make the other jump, which is then to the student profile. Okay, deep connection to the student profile. So if we look at the student profile, I particularly want to pick up on this one about interpersonal relations, which is the competence of interpersonal relationships, which is managing relationships, managing what Goleman calls relationship management. And so in order to do that, read what it says here. Competence is associated with the interaction with others, and they occur within different social and emotional contexts. This may be at home, this may be in the classroom, this may be with teachers, this may be with each other, this may be in a work group, it may be in the playground, it may be in a fight, it may be somewhere else. These competencies enable acknowledging expressing, generating emotions, building relationships, setting out objectives. So when we're talking about, when it talks about here, achievement orientation, addressing personal and social needs. So even when you ask somebody, what do you need? Generally, adolescents don't know what they need. Very often, adults don't know what they need. And there, you might know at home, if there's a conflict at home, and you stop and you say, what do you need right now? Or if your wife stopped and said, what do you need right now? It's very difficult to actually be able to articulate that if you haven't built your emotional intelligence. So the idea is that the kids learn this in school, develop it into adulthood, so they become more aware of what's going on. And also you don't get this, I've been looking at transactional analysis recently again, and it's about the way that we interact with people, either as the parent, the adult, or child, the role that we take within the, and then there's a lot about that in a book called The Games That People Play, psychological games. And it's how the role that you assume, and that's got a lot to do with emotional intelligence, understanding what's going on emotionally, what's working. I think I told you before about conflict that I had when I went to the health center, and the woman was horrible. But if I didn't have the emotional intelligence, I would think it was all about her, rather than understanding my own emotional state and what was useful from the information that I was getting and what my reactions were. Understanding myself more deeply, and then deciding what is it that I need to do now. So helping kids to do that. Helping them to adapt their behaviors to contexts of cooperation, sharing, collaboration, and competition. So even being able to compete, be a good loser when you're playing football and the other person wins, then, that's cool. You might not like it. It's a negative emotion, but maybe that will motivate you to play better next time. It motivates some people to cheat. It motivates some people to to break the rules of the game. So part of emotional intelligence then is coming to understand that just because you feel those ways, then you should act appropriately, and you learn to act appropriately. And what happens is, generally with kids, you tell them off, you say, which is modeling bad emotional management, really. It doesn't give them a model to follow. Actually, it does the exact opposite.
I have trouble with two things here. Well,
Yep.
So first,
Pick more.
At home, I find looking at myself, what I want and what I need are frequently two separate things. And
Yep.
I know that about
Yep.
myself.
Yeah.
And often I ask my wife or my kids, what do you want? But I'm not really listening to what they're saying about their wants. I'm trying to infer into their needs. And nowadays I'm doing that almost unconsciously. But I think I have to try to ask the need, not so much as the want. And another thing about behaviors is every so often I find that many people around me share on that very American adage that if you're not cheating, you're not trying enough. And I don't really have an answer for that.
That was a Portuguese thing.
Well, it isn't.
Particularly in politics.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. But
it's a Portuguese action, not a Portuguese saying.
Exactly, because we never say that. But the Americans, well, the ones I shared some time and projects with, they were blunt about it, and not at all ashamed of it, because it's well, at least with those guys, it was, yeah, you know, well,
I think it's
pretty
sometimes
normal.
there's macho bullshit. No, but I think you got a valid point, you know, and trying to figure this out at home, listening, and we talked about listening between the lines, really listening. And so by asking somebody what they want and listening to what they're saying and trying to figure out from that their needs, but then also then how do we get the person themselves, how do you get your kids to understand their own needs? There's another concept which we're not going to be doing, which is called nonviolent communication. And in nonviolent communication, one of the things that you have to do is to tell the other person what your needs are. And we're talking about emotional needs. So even in transactional analysis, when we're looking at that, understanding what the person needs, and then, so I'll give you an example. My mother will say to me, she'll come to my room and she'll say, are you doing anything on Saturday afternoon? And I'm like, what are you asking me? Because it's not about doing something on Sunday afternoon. What are you asking me? And then she has to say what it is that she's asking me. And I said, oh, because we were thinking about going out. It happened a couple of months ago. We were thinking about going out on Saturday afternoon and looking at articulated beds. So that, because my dad needs an articulated bed. An articulated bed is the ones that go up and down.
Yeah.
And so we're thinking about doing that on Saturday. And would you like to come with us? That's what she was asking me, but she kind of goes around this way of like, what are you doing on Saturday? And I'm like, you know, what does it matter what I'm doing on Saturday? What do you need? What do you want? What are you saying? What are you asking me? And she does that quite frequently. So it's like a game that she plays. So I have to kind of understand between when she says, do you have meetings tomorrow morning? Or what meetings do you have next week? And I'm thinking, what are you asking me? And then she'll say, oh, I have to make a I have to make an appointment for something, and I was wondering if you could take me. And I said, so what you need to know then is when am I free so that I'll be able to take you, not when I'm having meetings. You need to know when I'm not having meetings, you know. So it's kind of having those conversations, but sometimes it takes some identifying. I think my coaching training helps me to hear what it is that's behind the question, and then to ask the provoking question,
The real
get
question.
that article, the real question.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
this is sometimes the things that, you know, if we can learn how to do this, and we can do it with the kids that we mentor.
Yeah. Regarding this listening to the kids and asking them what they want and what they need, I work with kids, with teenagers every weekend in Scouts. And the Scouts method is ask the boy. So we are frequently asking what they want to do. And most of the times the answer is, I don't know. How do
I'll
we
tell you
deal?
another one as well, Marilia. If you, I don't know if you're living together with somebody, or if you got a boyfriend or a girlfriend or
Yeah,
a
I
dog,
have an husband. Yeah.
or a dog or a cat or whatever. But it's like, Andre will understand this. It's when you ask your wife, what do you want to eat? What do you want? Where do you want to go out for dinner?
I do
Oh,
that.
Sorry,
anywhere.
no. That's forbidden.
Anywhere, you know, anywhere. Oh, it doesn't matter. And then you suggest someone. Oh no, don't want to go there. And then you suggest another place. And say, oh no, not there. So where do you want to go? Oh, it doesn't matter. You choose. It's like, you know. And then
Yeah.
That
it's a
is so
trap.
true.
It's the other
It's
one.
a trap.
The other one that women do as well. And
Not
so
just women, huh?
I
Not
don't
just
allow
women.
this. I think statistically it's probably more. No, I don't want fries. No, I don't want chips. I just want a salad. Have some chips. I said, no, I don't want any chips. And then the chips come, and then they start taking yours. And I say, if you wanted chips, you could ask for chips. You're not having any of mine. Oh, I just want one or two. And then you're sharing a bowl of chips. A man doesn't want to share his chips with anybody. My dad will count them, you know. That's just fun stuff. So looking then at the areas that, you know, as we're building this, we're also working quite specifically with the student profile. Working in teams, using different environments, computers, communicating and working in a personal, in person or in a network. So on the internet, how do you communicate on the internet? How do you not lose your shit on the internet? You know, and we're talking, which is part of the other competency then, which is which is information technology, appropriate use of information technology, and online bullying and all that kind of stuff. They kind of interconnect with each other, but also then interacting with tolerance, empathy, responsibility, as well as argue, negotiate, accept different points of view, developing new ways of being, looking and taking part in society. I think one of the things that we don't know how to do is to argue. We expect that everybody else has to agree with what we agree with. And I think that's one of the clashes that we're having at the moment in the culture war of more extreme left to more extreme right, identity politics and so on, where people don't know how to argue. People just don't know how to argue. And what they're expecting, and particularly what you're getting from one group, is if you don't agree with me, your opinion is invalid. Rather than, look, you know, we don't have to agree. We don't have to agree. If you want to think that you're a dog and you want to bark, go bark. But I'm not participating in your craziness. I don't know if you saw this German protest where all these people were like barking and they were dogs and, you know, kind of crazy stuff. But it's just the space of you cannot have the conversation because you just shut down. You can't ask the question because you're shut down, because you don't have the emotional intelligence to actually listen to other people, not feel threatened by their opinion. I have a controversial opinion, very controversial opinion. I don't think that the gender pay gap is a real thing. But you can't have a discussion about it because everything that you say about it is kind of widely accepted that it exists. There's this whole conversation about, you know, things like the patriarchy and so on. What is that?
But is there any data?
Supposedly, but it's what you do with the data that counts. But I mean, I think a lot of it is the fact that you can't know what it is. I mean, it doesn't matter what your opinion is. If that's your opinion, if that's what how you interpret the data, or if, you know, if that's what's important to you, okay, you know, we can have a discussion about it. We can have coffee, and without you having to dump the coffee or humiliate me or cancel me. I mean, the whole thing with J.K. Rowling, you know, and people wanting to cancel J.K. Rowling, just going nuts and wanting to destroy her because they don't agree with an opinion that she has. There's another guy that I really like, and I went to see him in Porto, Jordan Peterson, and I said to my professor in university, who's very, 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 very left-wing Marxist, and he went, really? You went to see him? And I said, yeah. And do you know something? There's nothing that he said that you would disagree with. The problem is people don't want to listen.
Yeah, I've never heard anything from Jordan Peterson that wasn't backed either by science.
Yeah, I mean, he's he can be a bit in your face, but
that's style.
But
that's not.
How do you deal with those things in an emotionally intelligent way? If you can't do that as an adult, why not? Because you haven't learned in school, you haven't learned as a child, that hasn't been a priority to develop your ability to know how to interact with people in a healthy way, and it's not been modeled because probably, you know, people at home, parents were stressed and working hard and scream and shout and just authoritarian. I had a conversation with a CEO the other day. People in work are not listening to him, and and his kids at home are not listening to him. And so his question was, and I wrote it down the other day, I'm getting frustrated because nobody seems to listen to what it is that I'm saying, you know, and it's kind of like, I'm the authority, I'm the parent in the one situation, and I'm the CEO of the company in the other situation. And we looked at the way that he was interacting with the people that he worked with, what was the relationship, and it seemed to be more like a parent-child relationship. And people in work don't really appreciate the parent being treated in a way of parent-child. And at home, I said, I wonder how much at home you're actually the interaction is adult to adult, whereas actually the appropriate relationship there is parent-child. Because he's saying that, you know, my son, his 8-year-old son, wouldn't go to bed, and then in the morning he wouldn't get up. And I was saying, you see, if you'd gone to bed when I told you, then you would have, you know, you wouldn't be tired now. And I said, that's not a discussion that you have when it comes to the time to go to bed. You didn't go to bed when I told you to. It's not a conversation with an 8-year-old. That 8-year-old, whether they're screaming or shouting, they're slung over my shoulder and they go to bed. Conversation about it can come later when they wake up and they're rested, and then you can say, look how wonderful your day has been today because you went to bed on time, and this is why I'll make you go to bed on time. So, you know, but being able to deal with that, having kids being able to deal with boredom, how to deal with frustration. You know, you're allowed to be frustrated. Okay, so what are you going to figure out from being frustrated? What we're trying to do is rescue people from their emotions rather than allowing people to understand and to navigate their emotions. And so we come from emotional intelligence, which is knowing about this stuff, to emotional agility, which is actually navigating the stuff. So that's part of the profile that's here. And then the other descriptor in the profile: students join efforts to achieve objectives, valuing the diversity of perspectives on specific issues, and working with people who work on what they call FPSOs, which are floating. They're vessels that they deal with. It's like oil platforms, but they're a ship. And they're stationary. They stay stationary, and they connect, and they got, you know, like cables underneath them and so on. And I was doing training with the guys who are in charge of these platforms in several places in the world. And they're learning that to be culturally aware and culturally intelligent actually is a task. How can we best take advantage of the fact that we've got so many different opinions and so many different cultures? What is good about that? Well, why are we stronger because of that? What is the benefit of that? You know, how can we leverage that to our best advantage? And there was a company, it was HSBC, Hong Kong Bank, and they had a campaign in the 1990s of the world's local bank. Never underestimate local knowledge, because they were buying banks up all over the world. And so they had local knowledge in all these different banks. And so they marketed themselves as the world's local bank. Wherever you would go, we have local knowledge. You can count on us. We'll help you with your business. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. They won prizes. They won international prizes for the marketing campaign. It was funny. They don't use the phrase anymore, the world's local bank, because now they're not in every country. So they felt that it's not legitimate to use that anymore. But it was so culturally intelligent and emotionally intelligent what they did. And they were leveraging the diversity that they had. And they were putting themselves into a stronger position because they were all different, rather than trying to make everybody think and feel and act the same. And that's part of what this is. So even when we're talking about, you know, new kids coming to schools from different cultures and being able to adapt and get to know each other and so on and so forth, how to engage in formal conversations, informal conversations, do their assignments and experiences, how to debate, how to negotiate, how to get to agreements and to cooperate. I mean, all of this stuff. And this is stuff that, as we're dealing with the kids in the conversations that we have with them, is developing their ability. I mean, that's part of why we do mentoring adult to child, is so that there's an opportunity for a child who maybe doesn't have serious adult interaction and conversation where they're valued and where they're listened to. And it actually does help them grow. I could tell lots of stories. We don't have time to tell the stories, but I could tell you lots of stories of where the kid has grown because of the adult interaction, being able to have grown-up conversations. So in December, on the 13th, we will be working with Emotional Intelligence 2, which is the tools from Yale, some of the practical things, and some of the things you can actually do when you're meeting with your mentees. It's a tool for yourself. They're tools for yourself, but they're tools to use with them. Sit down, do it with them. You know, online it's okay, where you're actually specifically developing in this area of emotional intelligence, starting to talk about emotions, gives you an excuse to actually sit down with something that they look at, which is, you know, you're not giving them a sermon, you're not telling them about things, you're doing an exercise together or a game together. And then when things do come up where they need to talk about emotions, then obviously you're in a position to be able to say, well, hey, let's have a look at the tool. Let's have a look at what the emotions are. How do they feel? How do you feel by having these emotions? You know, do they feel good? Do they feel bad? So if they, you know, what do you want to do about them? What are the choices that you have? And so you're helping people to learn how to deal with their emotions, manage their emotions, understand their emotions, regulate their emotions. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we're helping the kids to do in a natural way by using some of those tools. But they go hand in hand as well with the whole idea of listening, which we've also talked about. So guys, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time.
See you.